This comment says, my dogs just started fighting after 3 years of being best friends, and it's hurting my heart so much. I just don't understand how it went from being fine to them not being able to even look at each other. Intra-household aggression cases are rough. They are one of the top 3 emotionally taxing behavior cases, in my opinion. I think intra-household aggression, family-directed aggression, and separation anxiety. And that's because these are behavior concerns that you don't really get a break from. They are constant. They are in the home. I'm Gabrielle Johnson, owner of Best Life Dog Services. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant with my bachelor's in psychology and sociology. I specialize in aggressive behavior and nervous system dysregulation, but if I was picking a subspecialty, it would be intra-household aggression. There are a lot of factors that impact an intra-household aggression case. There can be a wide variety of nuance. There are a lot of variables that impact intra-household aggression, and there are a lot of patterns that we see in intra-household aggression. And so while there can be a lot of variability in terms of severity, there's also a lot of predictability. And this is why I think it can be really helpful if you're dealing with intra-household aggression to work with someone who specializes in it, because that gives your behavior consultant the opportunity to be really familiar with these patterns and to be really proactive. I will sometimes look at a case where perhaps the presenting concern is not even intra-household aggression. Maybe we have not had any incidents of aggression between the pets yet. But there are red flags that I can see early on to say, let's get ahead of this here. Let's put some management into place here, build some skills here, do some counter conditioning here, etc. That can head off a problem. Likewise, sometimes folks will talk about what seem like smaller incidents to them. If we're having any level of fight, that's a problem. And the more those fights are rehearsed, the more likely that the next one is going to be bigger. It's going to be more. So it's something that we want to be really proactive about when we notice the tension and stress. The problem is, a lot of times, unless you're really well versed on not just dog body language, but also communication between dogs, unless you know how to read not only the body language, but the behavior of what you're seeing, sometimes you don't pick up on the signs that there is a problem before it becomes a really overt, more violent incident. And that is one really common pattern that I see, is that the first fight may have seemed to have come out of nowhere, but when we dig into it, we realize that what we thought was play was actually a series of really tense conversations. And what we thought was a dog being totally fine was actually a bit of walking on eggshells and careful negotiation. Sometimes, though, there are situations, I would say in my experience, this is less common, but not rare, where we have a situation where the dogs truly are really wonderful friends without tension or stress in their regular day-to-day, and then one incident happens, and that changes everything. I'll give you an example, content warning for a disturbing scenario. For example, I have seen multiple cases where the dogs had a positive relationship, and while playing, one dog's jaw got caught in the collar of the other dog's jaw, and they got stuck. And the dog who is wearing the collar that the other dog is stuck in can be choked out. I have unfortunately also in those scenarios heard of dogs passing away, but maybe it goes all the way to being choked out. They think the other dog is causing that and form that association. Meanwhile, the stuck dog thinks that the dog they're stuck on is doing something to them and preventing them from getting away. And it creates this real detriment to the relationship, this sort of single learning event. Gotta be really careful with collar safety. I had another case once where the dogs had a really positive history together, and then one fell off the sofa on top of the other, and the dog who fell onto the other dog was much bigger. Both dogs had been sleeping, and it just sort of created this situation where they both thought that they were under threat and had a fight. And then they had a second fight within, the first 12 hours or so, I believe, and it went from there. And that's another way that things sometimes spiral, is it's not uncommon at all to have an incident, a dog fight, and then folks don't realize how long those stress hormones can stay elevated. Why would you know that? And so, they may put the dogs back together the same day or the next day, and the dogs are still really stressed out. And so another fight occurs. And now we have sort of this double damage. The most common catalysts for intra-household aggression are high arousal situations, resources, and tight spaces. And obviously, if you have 2 or 3 of those factors going on at once, it's even more likely that there will be an issue. Tight spaces can be cars, it can be thresholds, it can be small rooms or crowded rooms. It can be the space between your sofa and your coffee table. I cannot tell you how many fights happen between the sofa and the coffee table, that little space. High arousal can be kids playing. It can be reacting to a different stimuli, a different trigger outside of the yard or outside of the house. It can be visitors coming in. That arousal comes up, and then there is less of a space to tolerate that other dog being in their space. And resources can be anything from one's personal space to access to their safe person, toys, food, treats, vomit, stolen items. Being out of routine or predictability is also a common factor. So we might see a lot of first fights happen around the holidays, or when parents get back into town after being gone for an extended period. In fact, I coach my clients ahead of time when they're going on a trip, when things are out because of the holidays, off because of the holidays, when we have a significant change in our work schedule, when we have visitors coming to stay, to consider that a stress event for their dog. And again, I work with dogs who are dysregulated generally, and so these types of things are harder for these dogs to get through. It can be more triggering. They tend to have lower resilience to stress. They tend to have a harder time self-regulating, and they tend to have more triggers than the average bear. But for all dogs, these things can be hard. Just some dogs it's more difficult for than others. I mentioned that there are several variables we look at in an intra-household case, and I'm going to list them now. One of the big ones to consider are the bite levels. There is a specific scale to look at for dog-to-dog bites. It's different than the dog-to-human scale, so you don't want to use the Sophia Yin scale or the Ian Dunbar scale to assess dog bite levels. You want to use the Kara Shannon scale. A level 0 fight, the first level of fight, doesn't even involve contact. It's a lot of back and forth making noise, all the way up to the top level when there is a death. There are 6 levels total. I think it's important for folks to realize that at that level 0, that is still considered a fight. That is a conflict. It's important. It's not just something that's happening. It's something that we want to be really proactive about. A lot of folks don't think that the fights are a problem until the first one with injuries or that need vet care. And I think that's a common mistake. The frequency of conflicts. Lower frequency is better for our prognosis. Another reason it's important to intervene early. The variability of conflicts is a factor, and that's sort of the more variety in the triggers for the conflict, the harder it is, and that's also related to the predictability of the incidents and the ability to manage. It's harder to manage and harder to predict when there are more variables. Medical history and social history are both very important. When we have chronic nervous system dysregulation or chronic pain or other health issues, that can make things harder. Obviously, with social history, it's easier if we have practice having positive social relationships with other pets. And then the past history of relationship between the pets that are fighting is also a factor. Do we have a solid foundation to build from? Training history is another variable. If we have a history of learning and doing that positively, that can be a very good thing. If we have a history of punishment or no learning history, that can make things harder. The family's resources and the family's ability to read body language are also big factors. Body language is a huge thing that we focus on in intra-household cases. Again, not only just being able to read the individual dog, but the communication between them. So if you take away one thing from this video, it's that if you suspect there's stress or tension going on between your pets, even if it hasn't led to a big incident, that's the time to intervene if you can. And working with someone who specializes in intra-household aggression can be really helpful.